Hello, and welcome to the Over 50 Health and Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin English, founder of The Silver Edge. Our mission at The Silver Edge is to inspire men and women in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and beyond to live their strongest, healthiest, most fulfilling lives. In this podcast, we share stories of amazing individuals who are doing just that, to help motivate you to become the healthiest version of yourself, regardless of your age. And now, on to today's podcast. Hello, my guest this week is Ray Gallagher. Ray is a 66-year-old former triathlete and fitness junkie who loves to work out and inspire others. Ray, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Kevin.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Well, I certainly want to talk about what you're doing these days to stay in great shape at your age, but let's back up and start at the beginning. What were you like as a boy?
I was always very active as a boy. I loved to be outdoors. I know my dad was a little bit more cerebral, and he was always buying me, erector sets and lots of indoor kinds of things. And I just would lose interest very quickly and just want to go outside and play and run around.
Yeah, and I think that was maybe in our generation a little more common, right? To get outside and play.
Yeah.
And so lots of kind of free form activity there, I'm guessing, running around.
Yeah, running around, riding bikes, playing army,
Yeah, right. Yeah. And any kind of sports early on, like before school, were you?
Yeah, I was in Little League.
Okay.
That was real big at my age. The whole soccer stuff and all of that all the kids are involved in now wasn't really common when I was younger, at least, where we lived.
Yeah.
It was Little League and Pop Warner football, but my mom wouldn't let me play that. And to be honest, I was too tall and skinny probably anyways. So
yeah. And then moving on into high school, did you remain active? Were you active at that time?
Yeah, I went out for the cross country team, and kind of an interesting story. The only reason I went out for the cross country team is at the time I had a paper route, and I wanted to quit the paper route really badly. And the only way to do that was if I went out for the cross country team, it didn't work out as far as training and practices. So I did that and found that running just kind of came really easy to me. In fact, in the first race that we did, this wasn't the varsity race or anything, it was the freshman team race, but I got second place. I shocked myself. And so I just really kind of stuck with that through high school, did a little bit of track, but mostly cross country.
So you found yourself to be a natural runner. I think that's a funny story. That the only reason you really went out for the cross country team is to get out of doing your paper route.
Yeah,
I think paper routes these days are a thing of the past. I don't think younger people would know what you're talking about, but certainly I had a paper route for a little while there.
And we lived in a very hilly area, so it was rough with all those papers and riding the bike up the hills and.
Sure, that's a good workout in itself, right?
You think it would have improved my cycling, but later on, but it didn't.
No, okay. Well, we'll get to that and talk about how that did or didn't transfer.
Right.
All right. So you found yourself to be a natural runner in high school, did pretty well there. What happens after high school?
I actually, unfortunately, kind of gave up on the running part of it, and I did around my junior year. I started lifting weights. Just because I was so thin and I wanted to, put some weight on. And I continued doing that, but really stopped the running. Every once in a while, one of the places that I worked at there, they would have this yearly 10K. It was a fundraiser, and I would do that, without any training or anything. Would just go out and do that and be sore for a month afterwards. But I didn't really get the bug again to start running until I was in my 30s. I think it was around 30 or 31. Just kind of watching the LA Marathon on TV and the Hawaii Ironman, and that kind of sparked an interest that, hey, with the Ironman, certainly someday I think I'd like to do that. But I, got up off the couch and started training for the LA Marathon and did that. And that's when kind of my second career of endurance, being an endurance athlete, started.
Okay, so let's just
that's a pretty big jump. I know.
Yeah, no, that is, but so you were doing the running in high school. It sounded like you might have maybe in 11th grade or so found a weight room. How did that happen? Is there a weight room in your school?
Yeah, there was a weight room in the school. The football team would use, but everybody had access to it when they weren't using it. And so I just started doing that. Really didn't know what I was doing. Would buy muscle and fitness magazines and, pick up different workouts, from that. I guess when you're young like that, no matter what you're doing, you're able to, put some muscle on, which I did.
And how long did that last? Yeah, right. Well, yeah, if you sound like you were tall and lean, right?
Yes.
Felt like an endurance runner, maybe.
Yeah.
But how long did the weightlifting last? Did that follow you into your 30s, or
that stayed.
Okay.
Yeah,
great.
That's like when I started doing the running again, and then started doing triathlons. I had to kind of switch priorities because the endurance training then took the priority, and the weight training was just ancillary to that.
Gotcha.
Just not enough time in the day to really put a lot of focus on both.
Okay, no, but that's great that you kept up the weight training. You got introduced to that at a very early age and kind of kept that, and we'll circle back around to that because certainly that's important for you today, right?
Yes.
Okay, so back to in your 30s somewhere. I guess you see the triathlon on TV, and you see it was the LA Marathon. Is that right?
Marathon, yeah.
LA Marathon being running. And what was the longest you had run up to that point?
Wow, up to that point, I think the longest I had run, I did some 10Ks, but
okay.
Normally I would just do 4 miles.
Mm-hmm. And so all of a sudden you got in your head, you know what? I'm going to run 26.2 miles, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, talk to us a little bit about what that was like. What the just that decision I'm going to do that, and then how did you go about training for that first marathon?
Yeah. So once I decided to do it, I realized I needed to have some sort of a training plan, and so I sought out, and I can't even remember which one I ended up using, but I found something that so you're going to run your first marathon, and here's how you do it. And it was just a gradual buildup of the mileage. Middle of the week, stayed at around 4 or 5 miles, but on the weekends is when you would put in the longer runs, and that was kind of an adventure. And I was lucky enough at that time. I was living in an apartment down by the beach, and so it was in Huntington Beach. I live in California, and they have a really long bike path that goes on for at least 15 miles. And so I would just start running on the bike path there, and each week added a little bit more until I built it up to 20, and which the program I was following at the time said that's what you should do.
Mm-hmm.
And then did it.
And then you did it. So were you training with a partner or doing most of this on your own?
I was doing it on my own. I've always kind of preferred to run on my own. I don't like running with another person. Now cycling, that's different. I tend to do better if I'm cycling with a group. But running's always kind of been an individual sport for me, and allows me to kind of get inside myself. And
yeah, especially I guess on those long runs on the weekend, right? You got plenty of time to think things through and work things out, right?
Yeah, and it was nice running along the beach too, because it was good scenery.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah.
So what was your first marathon? Was it the LA Marathon?
It was the LA Marathon. Yeah.
Talk to us about that that first race?
Well,
Walk us through how that went.
it. I think that was a really good first one for me because they have so many people at it. I think at the time they had 13,000. I think it's up over 20,000 now. But just being around that many people, and that really helps you because for about the first 5-6 miles, that crowd doesn't thin out.
Yeah, that's a lot of people. Yeah,
yeah, and but it helps to keep your mind off of what you're doing too when the pain starts to set in because they get a really good turnout of people, spectators supporting it, and so that's nice. And then along the way, they would have bands playing at different mile markers, and one of the things I'd seen when I was watching the LA Marathon, they would, and I forget which station at the time was covering, but they always would have a vehicle that was out interviewing the runners, the common folks.
mm-hmm.
And when I got to mile 20, when I was about mile 19, I think it was, I actually saw the truck with the camera and everything, and I ended up running backwards a little bit to get behind the truck so I could wave and be on TV.
Yeah. Okay. And then I assume you have finished it, right?
Yeah.
You completed that marathon?
Completed it, yeah.
What was that like? To describe kind of, I know that can be very emotional for some people, not so much for others, but what was it like to finish that first Ironman after putting in all that work?
It was pretty emotional. You come around the corner and you see that finish line and, all the people cheering and just knowing, the realization of what you've just accomplished. There's probably hasn't been anything that's felt the same as that first marathon finish, other than I was lucky enough to get into the Hawaii Ironman for my first Ironman. And once again, having always seen that on TV and just running down Ali'i Drive and thinking, wow,
I did it.
I did it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the only other thing that's been the equivalent to that first marathon feeling. Yeah.
No, that's great. And how long was your training leading up to that first marathon? Roughly.
Boy, it was so long ago. I used to, I think the program I had was at least a 12-week program.
Mm-hmm.
It might have been a little bit longer than that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So 4 months or so ish. Yeah. I think that's pretty common for marathon training programs.
Yeah.
Okay. So you finish that first one and, you get that emotional high of having worked so hard. You've accomplished something. You get to decompress after that. What were your feelings then? Was it more like, and I suspect I know what you were feeling, but you tell us, was it more like, hey, bucket list, I'm done? Because some people are one and done with that sort of thing.
Right.
Like, all right, I'm glad I did that, but never again. Other people are like, oh my God, I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
What happened there after that first one?
Oh my God, I'm just getting started.
Okay. Yeah. I figured you might have been since given what you've gone on to do. So what do you do? It's a week after the marathon. Do you sign up for something else or what happens?
Yeah, I signed up for shorter 10K races and things like that. But then I actually said, okay, so I've done the marathon and I still had this triathlon thing in my head. And so I said, I'm going to start training to do triathlons too. And because I figure I've done a marathon, how hard can a triathlon be?
Yeah. Well, now when you say triathlon, are you specifically thinking I'm going to do an Ironman as my first triathlon, or
not as the first?
Okay,
but that was my ultimate goal. Was
I
wanted to do an Ironman distance, but my first goal was just to complete. At that time, they had what is now called the Olympic distance triathlons, which are the miles, swim, 25-mile bike, 6-mile run. They didn't have a lot of the sprint triathlons that are so popular now, but I was able to find in Huntington Beach, they had a triathlon that was a little off on the distances. Wasn't quite an Olympic distance. I'm trying to even remember what the distances were. The swim was a half-mile swim, And I think the bike was about a 20-mile bike, and then it was like a 4-mile run after that. And so that's what I started shooting for, and had a really rude awakening because I had been doing the running, so I had that down. I hadn't really been on a bike. Went out and bought this garage bike, for like $20, which I very quickly ended up upgrading. But the really rude awakening was the first time I got into the pool to swim, because I swam one length of the pool and I was hanging on the end, sucking air for dear life. I'm going, oh my God. How can this be? I can run 26 miles and I can't swim one length of a pool.
Yeah. Two different things, aren't they?
Oh, very, very, very different. Yes.
Okay. So what did you do then to improve your swimming? Because that's oftentimes what's the most intimidating for folks that want to do even a sprint distance triathlon.
Yeah. That's always, and unless you've been a swimmer and kind of grown up being a swimmer, the swimming is the most intimidating of the three. I went and joined a master's swim program that was nearby, and just started from scratch there.
Yeah.
In the very slow lane. Never made it very many lanes over. Swimming was always my worst of the three.
Yeah.
Closely followed by the bike. Every triathlon, I was always so glad to get to the run.
Yeah. And it's usually the case that the fastest swimmers aren't necessarily the best triathletes, right? For me, unfortunately, the swim is my favorite piece of that, and I'd often be one of the first out of the water. But they come zipping by me on the bike, and I think to myself, "That's okay, I'll catch you on the run." But that's not the way that usually worked out. All right. Well, so you've got the bug now for these endurance events. You've done a marathon. You've got your first triathlon underneath you. Why don't you remind folks what those Ironman distances are for the swim, the bike, and the run?
Yeah. For an Ironman, the swim is 2.6 mile swim, 112-mile bike, and then a marathon at the end.
Which is 26.2 miles, right? For anybody who's not sure what that is. So that's a lot of work to complete, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very daunting when you think about it.
It is. And so you've got this on your bucket list. What happens? You've got that first triathlon under your belt now. You've built up some swimming stamina. Maybe you've upgraded that garage sale bike for something a little more appropriate.
Right.
How do you get from there to Kona?
Well, I did a number. It took me... I did triathlons for 3 years before attempting the Ironman distance. And so I just entered a lot of the Olympic distance races because that was predominantly what was around. And so I really kind of enjoyed doing that, liked that distance. It was challenging, but doesn't kill you. And then after a couple years of that, I said, okay, maybe it's time to start thinking about the Ironman. And it just kind of coincided with for those that don't know, the Hawaii Ironman. I mean, that's the Super Bowl of triathlon. That's the Ironman races, and you need to qualify to get into that race. But at that time, they no longer have this. But at that time, they also had a lottery. And so I applied because I wasn't good enough to to qualify. So I applied through the lottery to get in. And I got in. I was like shocked.
Careful what you wish for, right?
Well, that was the first thing I said to myself. In fact, the year that I got in was the first year they started doing just the regular lottery here in California. And when I got my letter that said I had gotten in, I thought to myself, I should have bought a lottery ticket, for the money lottery. This is obviously my lucky day. But yeah, that was something, getting that letter saying that I was in. But then you really start to freak out because you realize, okay, I'm one of, I can't remember how many lottery spots they had at the time, but everybody else in this race is the best in the world. They've qualified, and I'm coming in here, as a poser.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really kind of freaking me out too, realizing that, okay, I'm going to be pulling up the very end of this race.
Yeah, I can see how that could be intimidating, right?
Yeah.
You're lotteried in, and you're right. That's the world championship of
Yeah.
triathlons there. So how do you prepare for something like that? Given you're already in shape, right? You're
Uh,
doing these Olympic distances, like you said. That's still very challenging, but it's
yeah.
manageable.
Right.
Those distances, and what what do those training weeks start to look like leading up to something like that?
Yeah. So once again, I got a program, and it really kind of followed basically the same as it did for my marathon training. And that is, my middle of the week training didn't change a whole lot, because the program I was following was just to complete a Ironman, not to be competitive, but just get to the finish line. So, I was still doing my regular master swim workouts, which were 3 times a week, and running during the week, 3 times, and then the bike was a little bit more challenging to get in because with work and everything, so I got an indoor trainer, and a lot of my middle of the week riding was done on that. At some point, though, I did decide to start riding my bike from work to home, um, which was at least 30 miles at the time. And so I would drive in with my bike, ride it home. And at that time, my wife at that time was working at the same place, so she could take me in the next day. I was leaving my car at work. So that helped to get some extra mileage in during the week, on the bike. But it was most of the bulk of that uh, long distance training was done on the weekends.
Yeah, and people who maybe aren't familiar with training for endurance events, specifically marathons, triathlons, that's really life kind of revolves around those long runs, or in your
Yeah.
case, brick workouts,
Yes.
bikes. A
Yes.
brick workout is when you're putting two things back to back.
Right.
But life kind of revolves around that long run, right?
It
Your
does.
long ride. You're getting
Yeah.
up early typically.
Hmm.
You're very concerned about your fueling. It's not just fueling before, but fueling
Right.
during these long events, and then fueling when you get back, and then proper recovery. And it can be very all consuming,
Yes.
and it can be tough on a schedule, right? Because every weekend's revolves around it. You got to get to
Around
bed
that.
early, of
Yeah.
course, because you got this
Yeah.
ridiculous workout the next day.
Right.
So how did you manage your weekends? Were they? I mean, I'm guessing they just got progressively more and more volume over time.
Yeah. That's what I did, and would get up early as I could to get those things started, because you don't want it to impact the family too much. And they were being very understanding about what I was trying to do, and supportive. So that really helped.
That
Yeah.
helps a lot. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about fueling. We mentioned that you obviously got to fuel before you work out, and I think most
Uh-huh.
people know that. Most people probably know you got to fuel when you're done working out. But in endurance exercise, fueling is a different subject altogether, right?
Yeah.
Because we're fueling while we work out. Talk
Yeah.
to us about what your diet looked like while you were specifically in that era, while you're doing these marathons and triathlons, and talk to us about your fueling strategies during these races.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I didn't have very good fueling strategies. And I that Hawaii Ironman race, I was just lucky I made it to the finish line on that one, given my fueling. Because my strategy was I would just eat everything in sight, when I was training, and was getting away with that because of how many miles you're putting in. I should have been more strategic about what I was putting in my mouth. I did do a lot of carbs because that's what they said you got to do.
You're burning a lot of carbs.
Yeah. So you got a carbo load. And I ended up doing 4 Ironman distance races during the time that I was doing triathlons. And the best I ever felt during one was that first one, when I really kind of went in blindly, not knowing what I was doing. And on the race course, they had these guava jelly sandwiches that they were passing out on the bike, and I would live for the next
next sandwich.
Next sandwich. But that's actually the best I've ever felt. Every other Ironman race after that, when I was trying to maybe follow some sort of a program, it just didn't work out for me. I would get nauseous. I would over drink and get nauseous. I didn't feel enough and hit the wall really badly. And every other one after that, I had troubles. Just blind luck. That first one just seemed to work out. But
must have been those guava jelly sandwiches, huh?
Yeah.
Something in that. Well, let's go back. Let's go back to this first Ironman. So you're in Hawaii. That's got to be spectacular in and of itself.
Incredible.
Just the buzz around there.
Yes.
And what a awesome experience that must have been. Talk us through that race. How did that go for you? And again, tell us, what was that? You've already told us that was a pretty emotional finish, but talk us through that first race.
Well, it actually kind of starts when the week before, and I got to Hawaii, I think, on like a Tuesday or something before it was a Saturday race. And so it really starts then, because you start seeing all these Ironman triathletes that are there. I stayed at the race hotel, and they would have, as I was driving from the airport, you're coming in on the Queen K highway. And so I could see they had aid stations and stuff set up out on that highway just for the people that were training during the week. And I was at the host hotel, and where you swim is right there. And they call it Dig Me Beach, because the week before the race, all these triathletes are strutting their stuff out there. Like, look at me,
Yeah.
But they had the swim course completely marked off every morning with lifeguards and stuff out there. So you'd be doing your practice swims out there. So you really start getting engulfed in the whole race experience that week leading up. And they have different events that I participated in. There was one event that I wasn't going to do, and that's the parade of athletes. And at the last minute, I decided I'm going to do it. And I'm so glad I did that, because they had us all grouped by country. And then we walked through the town, and the streets were lined, and it was like being in the Olympics. You're walking in with your country, and everybody's cheering, USA, USA, and you're waving. So that was a lot of fun. And then I remember the night before, they had built the finish line to the race, and the grandstands there where people were sitting. And I just went there and sat and just kind of stared at that finish line, and just really kind of realizing, once again, what I've accomplished to get here, but what I'm about to do. Oh my God, what am I about to do?
Yeah.
But you wake up race morning. It's real dark. You go down there, and they got the floodlights and the athlete marking, and I mean, it's the Hawaii Ironman, so everything is just top notch. I missed the part. They had us check in our bikes the day before. And so I'm standing in line to check in my bike, and there's this little old woman in front of me, and she must have been in her 60s. She's old. I was in my 30s. And she had this bike that looked a lot like that first garage bike that I bought. She even had a little basket on the front of it. It was like,
Wow. Yeah.
and she was asking me questions about the bike and this and that. Then people were coming up to her and asking her for her autograph, and some of them had a book. And I come to find out it was Sister, and I'm going to get her name wrong. She was that famous nun that did the Hawaii race. Sister Madonna Buddha, I think, is her name. And she's famous. I don't know that she's still alive, but in fact, at the awards dinner, she killed my time when she
is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you would have never known it to look at her and the kind of basic questions she was asking me about the bike. So
That's awesome.
that was kind of amazing. But anyway, you get there race morning and you go through the body marking, and then you start to walk down to the water. And for the Hawaii Ironman, that swim start is the iconic scene of the mass start, because most triathlons you start by age group. But with the Hawaii Ironman, you get in the water all at once, and they tell you to kind of seed yourself as to how you think you're going to do. And so I put myself way in the back, because if you've been a part of a triathlon swim, you know that it can be a contact sport, and
it can be,
yeah. And especially when you're at the Hawaii Ironman. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to be in the middle of all that thrashing. But that gun goes off, and it's just amazing. All the arms flailing, and just that big mass start like that you've watched at least that I've watched on TV so many times. Before that, it's really it's amazing. And then the water is so clear that you're doing the swim and you're looking down and you're seeing all these beautiful tropical fish. So that kind of helped a little bit.
Right.
Kind of take your mind off of things too. And then they had a boat that was out at the turnaround point. And when you get and go around the boat and you're looking down, and then you see all these scuba divers with the TV cameras down there getting the shots they get of the swimmers from up above. So it's just something to be a part of, something that you've watched on TV so many times. You just kind of keep pinching yourself.
Yeah. It's saying, is this really happening?
Yeah.
So you finish the swim and you make the transition onto the bike. And how does that bike ride go for you?
The bike ride went pretty good. I'm not a real strong cyclist. I am convinced that I do not have a single fast twitch muscle fiber in my legs at all. I can ride for forever, but in terms of having the power and speed there, it's just not there. But it was going good, and once again, you're out on that Queen K highway and going up to the town of Hawi, which is the turnaround. And there's a slight hill as you get up to that. I get to the turnaround and come down, and there is just a tremendous headwind that I'm riding into. Plus, after I did the little turnaround, my gear switches, I had them out on my handlebars, and they broke. So now I am stuck with like 2 gears for the rest of the race. And there was a support vehicle at the bottom of the hill of Hawi, and they tried to, I think they got me 1 more gear. They did something to where I had like 3 gears at least. But that whole, after coming down the hill and riding into that headwind for about 40 miles of that race, I didn't get above 9 miles an hour. It was that, and the winds were that strong. And that's really demoralizing.
Yeah, I think anybody who's been out for even a long run, but certainly a long bike ride, and that out and back, especially when you turn around into a headwind, If you haven't done that before, you might be surprised at
Yeah,
just how difficult that makes things.
yeah.
And on a long out and back course, that's
It's that,
that's a tough way to.
and with
Yeah,
Hawaii, it's those trade winds.
yeah,
That
very
you're going
consistent.
into.
Yeah.
Um, but there was this one woman. She and I kept kind of trading back and forth, passing each other. At one point, I'm behind her, and I'm seeing fluid that's coming off her water bottle, and so I'm thinking, oh God, her water bottles are leaking. So I rode up to tell her, and as I got closer, I realized she was peeing. So she's just peeing right there on the bike.
It's a long day out there on the bike. That's
Yep.
right. Do what you got to do.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we get through the bike,
Get
and
through
I'm
the
sure
bike.
you're glad to be off the bike. Is that a fair statement?
So glad to be off the
All
bike.
right. Yeah, but you still got you got some
26
distance to
miles
cover.
to
Yes, you
to
do.
run.
So how does
Yeah.
that run go for you?
Well, the the transition for the run at that time was at the Sheraton Hotel, and you come in and they've got everybody. They take your bike, and you go running into. They have these big transition tents that you go running into, and you're mentioning nutrition, and I've forgotten about this. I am to this day a Diet Pepsi-aholic, and I certainly was at that time. But before the race, I realized I needed to do better with that. So about 3 weeks out, I stopped drinking any kind of colas at all and was just drinking water and trying to do everything, right. I get to this run transition, and in the tent, they have this long table with all sorts of food and stuff on it. But in there are all these colas on ice.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like, that was all I could do. That was it. I took some. And then I realized, okay, I need to, because I'd read that because these weren't diet, had sugar, that if you start doing that, you have to keep doing it. Because if you don't, then you're going to hit a wall. Yeah, you're gonna bonk, pretty good. And so so I did that. Coming out of the transition area, you had to go up a slight driveway to get up onto the highway. And there's all these people there cheering and stuff, and my legs were there were no legs. But I mustered being able to run up that driveway in front of all the people. And then once I got away from the people, that's when the walking began.
Yeah.
And when you do an Ironman race, especially unless you're one of the pros, you're gonna have some times when you're walking. And so I ended up walking a couple miles there in the beginning until I started feeling my legs, coming back. And then I was able to start running. And I think that actually helped me in the end, because it's the only time in a marathon race where the second half of that race, I had better mile splits than in the the ones where I was walking to be better, but the ones where I was running, my latter part of that race, I was stronger, and I think it's because of the little bit of walking that I did, at the beginning. But by then, for me, with the kind of time I'm doing, it's dark. It's dark out, and so you're just seeing. They give you these little necklaces with the neon things, and you just see the sea of, because there's no lights out there on that highway. It's pitch black, and let's see, you come up on a aid station, but you just see this sea of bobbing fluorescent necklaces in front of you. And there's a part of the race where they call it the energy lab, where you kind of get off the highway and you go down to where this energy lab is, and you turn around and come back up to the highway. And that's the first time you're really, getting to see other runners too, coming, the people that are in front of you. That was hard coming, because you coming out of that energy lab I remember that was a real difficult part of the run for me. But about 5 miles from the finish, they ran out of those Cokes. They had the Cokes through all the aid stations, so I was taking them, but they ran out, and I thought, I'm going to be in trouble. But I guess I had enough in me that it lasted me to the end. But I started hearing the announcer at the finish line. You could hear him announcing the people coming in, and that just gave me picked me up to get to the end there. And then you come into town and you round the corner and you start seeing all the crowds there that are lining, and you see that finish line, and that's just incredible.
Yeah, so that's a long day, right?
It was a very long. It took me 13 hours and I think it was 40 minutes to do it. They gave you 17, so I felt good that it didn't take me the whole 17.
There's a cutoff. So
there's a cutoff, and there's cutoffs for the swim. There's a cutoff for the bike. So if you don't make those cutoffs, those times, they pull you from the course. Yeah.
So, you've completed this thing, and now you're an Ironman, right? You're an Ironman for the rest of your life, no matter what you do. And kind of the same question. We know that you've gone on and you've done some more triathlons, but in that afterglow, did you decide then and there, okay, I'm not done yet. I'm going to do more of these?
I thought I was done.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought I was done at that point. I had still been, up until that point, been doing marathons, because like with the LA marathon, I think I did that first one, and then I think I did like 7 of them in a row, just LA. But so I figure, well, I'll go back to running some marathons and maybe doing half Ironman races. That's a little more doable. Continue doing the Olympic distance, and by then too, they started having the sprint races, and started doing those. But my Ironman races, they ended up being spread out. It's kind of funny. They ended up being spread out about in 5-year intervals.
Okay.
I was started getting kind of the bug to do another one. It was at exactly like 5 years from the point that I did the Hawaii one. It's enough to forget how hard it is, and just remember how good it feels.
Kind of start romanticizing that finish line feeling, and then realize, okay, I got 6 months of work to get ready for this.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got it sounds like for quite this was a big part of your life, right? Running and triathlons, and probably still is. What does your workouts look like these days? I see you on Instagram, and you're doing a lot more kind of bodybuilding type stuff. You're obviously still getting out on the bike a good bit, but what does a typical week look like working out for you these days?
Well, before I get to what a week looks like, yes, my workouts have changed quite a bit. And the reason for that is that back in 2017, I had my first episode of AFib, atrial fibrillation. And for those that don't know what that is the upper chambers of your heart, they start to kind of uncontrollably beat. And it was a Saturday morning. Alarm got off, because Saturday mornings I ride with the triathlon team. And so I was getting ready to, the alarm went off to get up for the ride. And I'm lying in bed, and I could just tell that my heart was going a mile a minute. And ironically, like about 3 days before that, I had gotten an Apple Watch. And so I looked at my Apple Watch, and sure enough, my lying in bed first thing in the morning, my heart rate was 165. And so I thought, oh, this is not right. And so I woke my wife on. I said, I think we have a problem. And went at that time, I didn't know what was going on. And so we went to the emergency room, and boy, that was an experience, because you go in, if you're having any problem with your heart, they just wheel you right in, and all of a sudden I've got all these people around me, and they're attaching all sorts of things to me. But from the description of it and everything, they suspected that I was having an AFib, and sure enough, that's what it was. And so they gave me some medications, intravenously while I was there in the hospital, in the ER, to try and bring that under control, and that wasn't working. And so what they end up having to do at that point is they end up having to shock you back into a regular heart rhythm. Thankfully, when she said that, she goes, "Don't worry, we're going to put you under to do that." And then, it put me right back into rhythm. And so at that point in time, it just so happened that on Facebook, how you get the little ads and stuff. I think it was, like the next day I'm on Facebook, and there's an ad for a book called the Haywire Heart. And I don't know, I'm trying to remember the name of the author. I can't remember the name of the author, but he is a cardiologist who is also a competitive cyclist. And the book is all about AFib and the incidence of it with endurance athletes. And it turns out that all of these long rides and runs and everything, they're real good for the plumbing of your heart, but the enlarged athlete's heart messes up the electrical stuff that goes on in the heart, and that's what controls your heart rhythm. And so in the book, it talked about all these different athletes, including Dave Scott, one of the most famous Ironman triathletes of all time. And he and I are the same age, and he had his first incident right about the same age that I did, the same time I did. And so it talked about them. And then he goes on to talk about how you can control it with lifestyle, try to control it with lifestyle changes. And one of the things you have to do is kind of detrain your heart. So you've got to cut back on all that really long training stuff that you're doing, and start acting a little bit more like a normal human being. And so I did that, and it was successful for a while, but then I started having more incidents. And so then the doctor says, okay, well, now we're going to have to try to control it with medication. And so we went that route, and I continued to train, but I cut my distances and intensities way back, because they do tell you keep exercising because that's good for you, but you just can't do the crazy distance stuff anymore. And so the medication controlled it for a while, but then it got to a point where the medication wasn't controlling it anymore. And I was, in 1 month, I was making like all these trips to the ER and having to be shocked back into rhythm. I got to where I was like Norm on Cheers. I'd come into the ER and everybody knew my name. It was like, Ray. I was like, oh, this is not good. And so at that point, we did what they call the ablation surgery. And so I had that done. And since that was 2 years ago, I haven't had any. They tell you in that first couple months after the surgery, you may have a few incidents because your heart's still healing and the surgery hasn't taken full effect. And I did have a couple incidents right after the surgery, but since then I haven't had anything new. So I completely changed my training at that point. Once I started having the AFib, I stopped doing races because I just didn't want to stress myself to that degree. And, to be honest, I was getting to the point, because I had been doing triathlons for 30 years. That's a lot of races. And I just wasn't enjoying the races like I used to. I was, kind of dreading them in some ways a lot of times. And so giving up the racing wasn't as hard as I thought it was, going to be. But I still go and do a Saturday ride with the team, but I don't do the full ride. and they drop me anyway. So at that point, I turn around and come back. So and then I do another ride on Tuesdays with a bike club. I'm retired. I've been retired for 7 years now, and I've been doing this Tuesday morning ride with them, and it's more of a social ride, and it's only 30 miles. So that's the longest ride that I do is that one, and it's very social. So I have those, and then running. All I do now with the running is I do sprints, kind of more of a HIIT workout, and then the rest of it is the weight training. I really kind of went full on into that because, like I said before, I'd always done the weight training, but it was always kind of ancillary to endurance, and now it's the other way around.
Right.
And so I started in the beginning when I started focusing on the weight training. I bought different programs to follow, but now I'm actually doing a monthly coaching with online coaching with Tom MacCormick. I'm enjoying those workouts, and now I put all my focus. My wife says, "You always have to have an obsession." Now the obsession is that.
Well, this one's probably a much less time-consuming obsession, though, right?
Yes,
I mean, I'm guessing your workouts are what, an hour long?
Hour
maybe?
long, yeah.
Yeah. So as opposed to 8 hours long,
right,
and
exactly.
And then that recovery time and the refueling time after.
Yeah.
So big difference. So that's interesting. I didn't realize that you'd had that the AFib and a few years back, and then the ablation surgery there, and that's kind of what made that transition.
Yeah.
And it sounds like it wasn't even a hard transition so much to give up, because after 30 years of that, maybe it was time for a new chapter. And so you're obviously still in great shape, taking great care of yourself.
Oh, thanks. Actually, I feel the best I've ever felt. You don't realize that endurance stuff really beats you up.
It does. It takes it out of you. I mean, just that much volume is tough to sustain over time, especially for as long as you've done it. Now you're working with Tom MacCormick, who's I think he's one of the top guys in the field. So that guy knows what's going on.
Yeah.
And you're looking great at 66. So you're feeling as good as you ever have.
Yeah.
What does your diet look like these days, and how might that be different from when you were doing more endurance type activities?
When I was doing the more endurance type activities, I was eating a lot. I mean, just although you start getting older, you start, even the endurance stuff doesn't keep the weight off. But I didn't really start getting serious about diet until I started doing the weight training. Because one of the things that happened was leading up to the ablation surgery, there was a period of time where I was in constant AFib. And what happens is because they couldn't get me, the shocking of the heart wasn't working anymore. But there was about a 3-week period there where waiting for the surgery where I was just in constant AFib. And what happens when you're in that is, I mean, I felt fine, but when you go out and try to do something like run or bike or anything like that, within less than a minute, you're really feeling it, and you're sucking wind like you've never sucked wind before. And so I wasn't able to do the kind of things that I was doing that was helping to keep obviously the weight down. I was able to do some walking and a little bit of weight training, but you have the surgery, and then there's a period of time where you're not supposed to do anything. And then after the surgery, I looked at myself and I was like, wow, I've really put on some weight. My around the middle had really kind of gotten out of control. So I decided I needed to do something about that. And that's when I started getting the programs that I was using. And there was a first one that I did was Live Lean, online coaches too, but it's you purchase programs, but they give you a lot of diet advice. And so I really started looking at what I was eating, tracking my calories with MyFitnessPal. It was surprising to me. I was able to cut added sugar out of my diet. Now I'm not crazy with it. Like we were just on vacation and, we'll go and get a frozen yogurt or something like that. But other than that, I don't eat any sugar. So I stopped doing that. And looking at my macros and, trying to hit my macros. And so I'm much more strategic about what I'm putting in my mouth.
Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense, right? You're getting older, your activity levels changed dramatically, right? As opposed to that long, slow endurance all the time where you're burning so many calories, you're getting away with it, to more intense kind of bodybuilding type workouts, right? You got to fuel a little differently. And it sounds like you've got that, you're dialing that in. You're watching, you've got a calorie number, I'm guessing, that you're hitting.
Yeah.
You're on your MyFitnessPal with your hitting your macros. So that's great.
Yeah.
And then how many times are you actually working out? So I think you're saying that you got a run in there, a couple bikes, but with the weight training, how many days a week are you hitting that?
The weight training, the program that he has me on is 4 days. It's 2 days upper, 2 days of legs. And then I take one full rest day. That's on Fridays. So on Tuesdays, which is the 2 bike ride days, I'm not doing any weight training on those days. But on Thursdays, which is my sprint day, I'll do the weight training in the morning, and then in the afternoon, I'll go do a sprint workout.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's where you are today. What's next for you? Do you have anything coming up that you're looking? Do you have another goal, or what's on the horizon?
That's a good question. I just to keep doing what I'm doing. Like I said, I've been retired for like 7 years. My wife is about to retire, so probably after the first of the year. So looking forward to that, and hopefully doing some traveling once all this COVID stuff gets under control. So it'll be a challenge, figuring out how to work in the training and workouts, while on the road. But I know that will always be a part of my life. I just want to continue. I want to, the older you get, the harder it is to put on muscle. Now, I've actually been able to put on some muscle since I started following these programs, which has kind of surprised me, being in my 60s. But I think it's because before I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just lifting weights. And so in some ways that I might be a newbie when it comes to weight training, which is helped with that. But just to hang on to whatever muscle I have for as long as I can. And the whole reason I do this is quality of life. You look at your peers and who aren't, and it's just so different. And so back when I was doing the endurance races, my goal was I was going to be the first 100-year-old to qualify for Hawaii.
Wow. Yeah.
But obviously that's not going to happen. But I don't see myself stopping unless for some reason, my health takes a turn that doesn't allow for it. But hopefully doing all of this will keep that from happening.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like Mark Ripito says, stronger people are harder to kill. So just keeping at it. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap up here, Ray, what would you say to somebody who listens to this podcast or maybe finds you on Instagram and is inspired by what you're doing? You look great. And maybe they're one of those people that haven't been active all their lives and they've got some metabolic disease happening. They've come back from their doctor and maybe the doctor's telling them, hey, you need to lose some weight. You need to get in shape. You need to eat better, which can be overwhelming. That's vague advice. And B, it can be a little overwhelming if you don't know where to start. What advice would you have for somebody to get started on the road at, say, in their 60s? How would somebody start just to get their feet on the path of getting healthy and fit?
Yeah. Well, one is just making a commitment to start. And it doesn't have to be big. I mean, just start moving, start doing something, and just gradually add to that. I mean, you don't have to go out and do the whole thing at once. Build up to it. Do some research on the internet. Maybe hopefully find. There's a lot of free advice on the internet that you can find it to kind of start educating yourself as to what you should be doing, how you should be eating, be more healthy. You don't have to change your diet overnight. Just start making very small little changes to it and build on it. I think it's all about making, that first small little change and then making a commitment to keep adding to that change and keep moving forward. Don't go backwards. And if you're the type of person that does better with other people around that are training, then, do that, or get a training buddy, or, go to the gym. I tend to like to do most of that stuff just on my own. I'm self-motivated. So that seems to work better for me, but you just got to start, build slowly, track your progress so you can see that you are making progress. And, before you know it, you start seeing these changes, and that's motivating in and of itself right there.
Yeah, it certainly is.
Yeah.
I love that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I love the idea that you say you got to start with that commitment, right? Yeah. And then to start small and build. And that's, I think, very, very solid advice. I think that's one of the things that happens to maybe not even just to older people, but people in general. They make a New Year's commitment. Okay, I'm going to get to the gym, and now they've got this, I'm going to do this, I'm going to change my diet. And they do so much at once that it's overwhelming and it's not sustainable.
Exactly.
And then they say, well, this isn't working, or they just give up because it's too much.
Yeah.
And I think that people don't realize that even tiny progress is still progress. I love that. Start small and just build on that and track it, and you start to see the success, and then you start to feel better. And that's the motivation, right?
Right.
From the results that you get and the quality of life. Well, Ray, where can people connect with you? I know you have a fantastic Instagram account. How would you like people to get in touch with you?
The Instagram account would be great. Yeah. Okay. That's probably the easiest.
Yep. And I'll drop that into the user notes so folks can find you there. Well, Ray, thank you so much for coming on today. Thanks for sharing your story. You're an inspiration. You're a great ambassador for healthy aging, and certainly wish you the best of luck in all your future endeavors.
Oh, thank you. Thank you really so much for having me on.
Well, that's our show for today, folks. If you enjoyed today's episode, please tell your friends, and please consider subscribing and giving us a 5-star review. All the show notes and much more are available at our website at silver-edge.com. That's silver-edge.com. So until next time, stay strong.